Tencent also in the news, and we mentioned them in the context of NetEase here. But Tencent says here seeks bigger stake in Assassin's Creed maker Ubisoft. So Tencent, it says, plans to raise their stake in Ubisoft. They want to become the biggest shareholder in the company. They bought a 5% stake in 2018, and supposedly they want to increase that stake. It's not clear how much they want to own in Ubisoft, which is valued at 5.3 billion. But Tencent aims to become the single largest shareholder of the French company with an additional stake purchase. There's a family that owns 15% of Ubisoft still today, and obviously they make games like Assassin's Creed. What do you guys think of Tencent buying up more of Ubisoft? I mean, it's sort of maybe the final form of what we've been saying about Tencent for literally years now. Like, they just want to own a piece or a big piece of every single game developer at some point. But what's the play here specifically in your mind?
I mean, I can go on. I think it's smart. I mean, like we said, Tencent has been trying to creep more and more into the West, particularly as their home market has become more challenging politically with a lot of the rules and regulations and stuff. So they've clearly had it in their strategy to get bigger in the West. I think it would be politically impossible for them to buy or acquire something in the U.S. Like I don't think that the government here would allow them to acquire EA, for example. It would get disallowed or whatever disapproved by the FTC. So it makes sense that they're going after Ubisoft, especially at this price. I mean, I've never been like super positive or bullish on Ubisoft historically, but at 5 billion, it feels like we've gotten to a point where we see things, like Bored Ape Yacht Club is worth like 5 billion, and they don't have nearly as good a franchise. Like they have nothing relative to Ubisoft. You're getting like real IP and a ton of development capacity. Like I think they have 20,000 developers. So like you can do a lot with that if you're someone like Tencent, and they already have a stake, so they know the family, they know the company. Like I think it makes a ton of sense.
I mean, in that context, if you guys buy Jeff's premise here, are we just going to see Tencent go on a buying spree as a consequence of sort of suppressed valuations on the gaming side?
Has Tencent been off of a buying spree? I mean, Tencent's been on a buying spree since we've been talking about Tencent. So,
That's
yes,
true.
I think that will
They don't
continue.
seem to be valuation sensitive, but um, I mean, maybe they accelerate. I don't know. Even
Hmm.
assets like Ubisoft start looking like real value, right? Even if you could argue. Here's the other question, because we just talked about Activision Blizzard. Does Microsoft maybe rethink the size of that deal? I mean, markets have been hit pretty hard since that deal was,
I, but
announced.
but I don't think they like. This is way out of our depth as like M&A attorneys. But like, there's
Yeah,
no, you can't just be like, oh, sorry. Like, turns out we wanted to pay less. Like, no deal. Like, and there may be a way. They may. I guess in theory, maybe there always is a way to get out of contract. But like, I think once you've signed these things, like you're pretty bound. To Jimmy, you might know better than us, but like you're pretty bound to go through with them unless like maybe they could tank the regulatory thing and like ask the regulators to block it. But
That's
yeah,
so funny. Again, guys, none of this is financial or legal advice, regardless of
There's
qualifications or
the lawyer
licenses.
coming in.
Regardless of qualifications or licenses of those of us on the show, these are not intended as those types of opinions. The one thing I would posit or add to that equation, though, is yeah, Microsoft bought at the height of the market, but they were still buying a property that was completely in disarray, that had a ton of legal problems, and that was all factored into the deal. So I understand in retrospect, yeah, hindsight 2020, and they, like other people that maybe bought crypto or other stocks, at inopportune moments, they at least weren't getting an entirely crappy deal because the asset itself was under question from a number of different ethical and legal perspectives that were, plaguing them for months before Microsoft came and saved them. So a different question entirely, I suppose, of whether or not they have a legal mechanism to back out now. But and I'm really answering it as well. Even if they had that ability, that exit strategy, would they still want to invoke it? Because one, the property is still valuable to them, which is why they forked up, what was it, 70 billion, but two, I can't remember what the exact cost per share ended up being. I remember it was pretty favorable for Activision shareholders, but they still had factored in other considerations in that deal, independent of where the market was at the time. For this Tencent deal, though, I like it, right? Tencent basically looking at their portfolio, seeing what they already own, seeing if they need to mitigate their risk here or there, or right, and get out, or if they want to double down on something. And so it makes a lot of sense, especially if the market is heading into more uncertain times and more of a bearish sentiment, that they saw something that works. They have very strong IP. Ubisoft obviously isn't going anywhere, and they said, yeah, let's do this a little bit bigger. So I think we'll expect more of this from Tencent, honestly, over the next 6 months, not just new investments in new companies, but either pulling out or doubling down, because it looks like that's what they're doing with their portfolio right now, is reevaluating their current risk.
It's definitely a buyer's market right now, no question. Right, this is the time to be buying and investing. Rod says, note on Tencent, they still have not have a single new game approved in China since the gaming ban was lifted. Well over 100 games have been improved in China this year, and none are Tencent games. That's interesting. Tencent being targeted by their own government, and maybe this is why they're pivoting more heavily towards the West. That's an interesting thought, Rod. A very, very interesting thought.